Don't let the Knicks being the third seed fool you. They're not on the same level as the Cavs and Celtics. For me, there's a significant gap between them. I'd group the Knicks with teams like the Bucks and Magic rather than with the true conference favorites. I draw a clear line between the top two seeds and the rest because, in my opinion, the Celtics and the Cavs are really who I'm banking on going against the Western Conference's best. What really opened my eyes to this reality, and might open yours too, is that the Knicks are 0-5 against the top two teams in each conference. On Friday, they were blown out by the OKC Thunder, losing 126-101. In that game, Isaiah Joe hit 8 3-pointers and scored 31 points. These weren't contested shots either, they were wide open looks. It wasn't a case of good defense, better offense. The Knicks simply left him unguarded. I get that SGA draws a lot of defensive attention, and teams often pack the paint to stop him from driving, but at some point you can't overhelp and leave shooters wide open. Normally in the NBA, you can live with the other team making threes as long as you're knocking down your own shots on the other end, but that wasn't the case here. The Knicks shot just 13% from 3 as a team. In the modern NBA, that's just not going to cut it. One of the biggest problems was Mikal Bridges' performance. He scored 0 points on 0 of 9 shooting, including 0 of 7 from beyond the arc. Beyond the fact that a key starter went scoreless, what stands out is that almost all of his shots were threes. While the Knicks can rely on the three-point game, if it's not working, they need to adapt. Take a page out of Shea's playbook and focus on attacking the paint instead. Of course, the Knicks didn't make any adjustments, and as a result, the game was never competitive. At one point, they trailed by as much as 30 points. If you watch the game, it became clear that their defensive integrity collapsed when their shots just weren't falling. That's a major issue, especially against someone like SGA, who is playing at an MVP caliber level. Even without Shea though, I feel like the Thunder could still be a playoff team, especially once Chet Holmgren is fully integrated into the lineup. The talent on that roster runs deep. On the other hand, the Knicks can't say the same thing about their star Jalen Brunson. Losing him would be an even more massive blow. Their starting five, Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Karl Anthony Towns, looks super solid on paper, but the Knicks would be in a much better position if they could split the 48 minutes of game in half and play their starters the whole time. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Despite this, Tom Thibodeau seems to act as if it does. Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart lead the league in minutes played, while OG Anunoby and Jalen Brunson rank in the top 25. The Knicks' lack of depth forces their coach to lean heavily on his starters. This isn't anything new. It's a pattern we've seen from him before, dating back to his time coaching the Bulls. So just know that it isn't a recent development. You see, in the 2012 playoffs, the Chicago Bulls, the team that he actually coached, entered as a 1 seed, largely because he played his starters so many minutes during the regular season, but he came back to haunt them. In the first round against the 8th seeded 76ers, the Bulls were cruising in Game 1 with a comfortable 12-point lead and just over a minute left. Despite the situation, Thibodeau kept Derrick Rose in the game, and Rose ended up tearing his ACL. If Rose hadn't been on the court at that point, the injury likely wouldn't have happened, though it's possible it might have occurred later down the line, given his aggressive style of play and awkward landings. That injury is often seen as a moment that ended Derrick Rose's career as a superstar. While Thibodeau isn't entirely to blame, as Rose's playing style contributed too, his tendency to overwork his stars played a role. This raises concerns about Jalen Brunson's future, as the heavy minutes could lead to a similar fate. Even if it doesn't result in a star player suffering a career-altering injury, fatigue is a serious issue that the Knicks need to address. With an 82-game season, the last thing they want is for their players to be too exhausted to compete when it matters most. Another drawback of lacking depth is the inability to hold players accountable. Against OKC, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges combined for just 4 points. That would have been a perfect opportunity to bench them, but who could you sub in? The lack of reliable options forces these players to stay on the floor, logging 36 and 32 minutes, while the team is left relying heavily on Jalen Brunson and Cat. At that point, the strategy becomes run some screens, hope the pick and pop works, and let those two figure it out. Not using the bench also creates longer-term problems. If you only focus on your starters and neglect developing your reserves, you're left vulnerable in the playoffs. When a starter inevitably gets injured or needs rest, there's no one ready to step in because the bench didn't get meaningful reps during the season. Part of the Knicks' bench struggle stems from Mitchell Robinson's absence. He hasn't played yet this season due to and off-season surgery on his left ankle. When he returns, he'll help alleviate some of the burden on Cat by providing rim protection and rebounding, even if he doesn't contribute much offensively. His presence could also help the team manage minutes better and keep players fresher for the playoffs. That said, if I were the Knicks, I'd seriously consider adding depth at the trade deadline. The front office showed they view this team as a contender when they traded for Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. They got the better end of that deal, sending Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo to Minnesota. Randle doesn't bring the same level of production or versatility as Cat, and DiVincenzo's best days with the Knicks seem far behind him as he's playing for the Timberwolves now. By making that trade, the Knicks sent a clear message. They're all in on competing. Adding depth would reinforce that commitment and address their biggest weakness. But what do you think? How can the Knicks prove that they really are threats in the East? Tell me in the comment section below. Until next time, peace.